Hello everyone and welcome to Harv's World for another episode of HAUT BELERON. That's right, we are back in France on Mr. Swede's farm. I've checked already with Salter Sugar, that other farm that wants me to help out, and there's no work over there today, but today we get to bring in our first harvest, our first planted harvest. I know I did a little harvesting to get started over here, but we get to harvest our wheat. And it's going to be an important day, important month, I should say. That always trips me up these days. Month, day. We go from month to month, not day to day anymore. Anyway, it's going to be an important day because an important month. Man, I just did it again. It's going to be an important month because I've got a lot to get done. Now, I want these fields cleared and prepped, if at all possible, today, Harv, today, because I can plant my canola in August. Not only that, I want to merge these two fields together. I know I said I like this little access road here, and I do like this little access road here, but not as much as I'm going to like having an extra half acre or so to plant on this area. Yes, area. My brain is melting. I'm going to be bringing Eric in today for sure. In fact, I'm probably going to let him start running this harvester here before too much longer, because quite frankly, there's just too much to get done before August hits, and I want that canola in as soon as possible because I want to be able to harvest it as soon as possible next year. Getting the oils going for Mr. Swede is one of our first steps toward getting our production up and running to help out as he gets ready to build his restaurant and to provide for his other restaurants to cut costs. In this day and age, that is no small feat because, quite frankly, costs are high. And they keep going up on everything, so I understand why Mr. Swede wants to produce his own. It makes absolute sense to me. I hope it makes absolute sense to you. And we're going to be getting back into our French trivia, if you want to call it that. We're going to start talking about famous French people. That's right. We've done a little bit of that, actually, in the Baltic Sea, even though we had a very hasty departure from the Baltic Sea. Thank you, Nico. Anyway, yeah, we talked about the Viking Rollo. And when before France was France, it was known as Francia. Rollo the Viking invaded Francia and put on such a fierce display that the king of Francia said, dude, I don't want you doing that no more. So I'll give you this land if you promise not to invade Francia anymore, and if you promise to help stop any future Vikings from raiding my country. And Rollo took him up on the offer. And as we have discussed before, that land is now known as Normandy. Normandy basically means Northman. So, yeah. A lot going on in French history. There are a lot. France has a very, very long, detailed history, as I'm sure you can imagine. Most European countries do. France is no exception. And today we're going to be looking at a young lady who changed the course of history and is still, even being born in the 1400s, to this day, there's not a French person alive who doesn't know the name Joan of Arc. Or in Harv's very butchered French, Jeanne d'Arc. Sorry, France. I never said I was going to speak your language well. Yeah, we're going to get into Joan of Arc. And man, I'm going to have a bucket load of straw. And I think in order to help advance the cause here, because I've already got a lot of straw in the silo, and the silo will only hold so much total. And I want to keep building up silage in that thing. That's really gonna move us forward in a big way. 18 million cattle. I'm gonna feed them. Not my own cattle, just the nation of France and all of the cattle that they have. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be doing my best to feed every single one of them and make a tidy profit along the way. That's my goal anyway. I hope I get there. I very much hope I get there. I'm going to try to get there for Mr. Swede's sake and the sake of his farm. And yes, I know I'm going to cut across here, but I want to get a nice straight path. It gets a little bit funky on these ends down here when they get angular like this, so I like to cut the angles, if you will. Almost got a full harvester. Oh, there it is. We just topped it off. And since I'm so close to the silo, there's not really much need of a chaser bin. So I'm going to get Eric on the job here, and I'm going to start collecting up this straw. And I might just have to hire another helper to get it out of here. Sell it to the animal dealer as quick as possible. It's not a great price right now, but it's a good price, and we're just going to have way too much of it. Way too much. So I'm going to do the best I can to thrash this harvester, break the pipe right off. Yep, that's what I'm going to do. Believe it or not, I thought I had completely nailed this. Second time's the charm, right? Alright, let's get things trucking here. Well, I got distracted. Got involved in something else. I did call in another helper. Just random farmhand to start hauling straw over to the animal dealer. It's not going to give us a great price, but I need to get it out of my silo, because my silo is going to fill up if I'm not careful. And so by the time I got him all squared away and set up, am I going to swing? Ew, I barely made it, but I made it. I'll be darned. By the time I got him squared up and set away, Mr. Kuntz is on the case. Well, he's on the Deutzfahr. But you know what I mean. He's over there, and he's gotten way ahead of me on this straw. And there's a lot of straw in this field. A lot. Cereal crops always produce a metric ton of straw. That's okay. We're going to make a little cash off of it. I can see right now that my helper has made his first delivery. $2,700 on straw. I'll take it. That was 26,000 liters that he took over there. So just a little bit over 100 per 1,000 euros, I should say. I've got to keep that in mind. Euros. We're in Europe. It's euros. Anyway, I want to get this straw cleared. I want to make sure that I keep plenty in the silo to keep him running. He should be on the way back to pick up another load. Fingers crossed that that's what's happening. And this is taking a little bit longer because I've got other chores to get done today too. This bunker silo is going to need to be emptied because tomorrow's going to be grass cutting day. No, not tomorrow. Day after. Or not next month, but oh, shut up, Harv. September. We'll be cutting grass in September again and making hopefully another 100,000 liters or so of silage. That's my goal anyway. It's going to take all afternoon just to get the bloody straw off the field. And then, of course, we've got all of the usual. And I'm going to merge these fields, which means I've got a couple extra tasks at hand to do also. I need to plow in this road. I'm going to have to put some lime on that section when I plow it in. And of course, everything has to be mulched. Because of course it does. And the whole field will need to be prepped for planting again. Luckily, I'm not going to have to spend any money on a planter. Putting canola in anticipation of turning it into oil. Let's hope so. What I really need is for my grass to pay off in the winter time. You know, that's the best time to sell silage is winter. Obviously, stores start running low. And if you can hang on to it until there's a little bit of a shortage, those prices go up, and then Bob's your uncle. You have got a small gold mine on your hands in the form of cattle feed. Or I do, anyway. That's the plan, and I'm sticking to it. I want to keep an eye on my guy and make sure he's getting over here to reload okay. First time on the farm, I'm not entirely sure, and I'm not doing a good job. I'm trying to track him to see if he's coming or not, and I'm getting way up. I'm not going to get straw collected if you keep doing this kind of crap, Harv. Finally, the last of the straw. Mr. Kuntz finished up harvesting a little bit ago. It took me this long to catch up, and well, at this point, because he told me he was done, and I said, you want some more hours? And he said, yeah, absolutely. He'll take whatever he can get. And just about that time, my straw hauler was coming in. So I said, why don't you cut him loose and take over, and you run that straw over to the animal dealer. And there's still plenty to go over there, as I cannot back this trailer in today for some reason all of a sudden. I got to get over to the shop because there's a piece of equipment I need to do the next stage on this job. By hook or by crook, I am going to get this field rolled today, one way or another. Now, I did promise we were going to get into Joan of Arc, and let's do that right now while I finish up my day here on the farm. So, Joan of Arc, she's one of those people who's kind of an enigma. We all know her name, or, you know, a lot of us know her name. Not going to say everybody, but a lot of us know who she is. But we don't really know the story behind what she did. We all know that she fought dressed as a man. She went into combat. She was fighting for France. But who really was Joan? That's what we want to know, right? Right. Well, about 1412... Joan was born. They don't know for sure. They say about 1412 because they didn't really keep accurate birth records, but they know some of the history around what she went through. She's born into a small village, a small family in France, and she wasn't educated. She didn't receive a formal education. Now this was you know, standard practice. In those days, they didn't believe that education was required for women. You know, that was their thinking in the 1400s. This was a long time ago, remember? Got to keep all that in context. She's born to a family. Her father was actually a farmer, and her mother was very, very devout. But Joan never learned to read or write. However, her mother instilled in her a great love of God and the Catholic Church. And Joan took this religion very deeply to heart. She devoted herself to the church, to God, and to the church's teachings. Very important to her in her life. So much so that she actually, much like a nun, took a vow of chastity. And when her father tried to marry her off at 16, she was so convinced that she needed to follow the path of God that she actually convinced a court to not force her to marry, even though her father was trying to get her married off. Now, Joan, before all this marriage stuff happened, she turned about 13 years old. She started hearing voices. Voices that she interpreted to be the voice of God. That God came down and spoke to her and said, "It is your duty, it is your job. I am giving you the task of ensuring that Charles be installed as the King of France. You have to take care of the fact that Charles absolutely must be the King of France." This is heavy stuff for a 13-year-old. And of course, this is, in her mind, this is the voice of God speaking to her. And there is nothing she's going to take more seriously than that. This is Joan of Arc we're talking about, someone who loves the Catholic Church. Now, all of this took place toward the end of what was known as the 100 Years' War. The 100 Years' War came to an end about 1420, so Joan would have been about 8 years old. Long story short, France and England, during the Middle Ages, medieval times, whatever you want to call it, had been at each other's throats, back and forth, throughout history. Before this, after this, the whole 9 yards. England at this point had the upper hand. They totally had the upper hand, and they came in and whomped on France. They signed a treaty in about 1420 that disinherited Charles as the King of France because the English were doubting that he was even a legitimately born son of royalty. Bloodlines, all of that, big deal in in royal families, that kind of thing. So, with that said, Charles was pretty much put into exile by Henry V. Another story for another time. If you're a fan of Shakespeare at all, he wrote a very, very good, well, it has been adapted into some very, very good movies and such. Stories of Henry V and his conquest, but Henry defeated the French, took over England, and this went back and forth over hundreds of years. France would rule England sometimes, England would rule France sometimes. The bloodlines were all intermixed. It got ugly. With all of that said, Joan is in the middle of this, especially toward the end, and she had seen the face of war. The people in her village, many of them were forced to become refugees because of the constant threat of English invasion into her little village. Now, she's already been told that it's her job to get Charles on the throne. And she very much believes that that is what God has called her to do. So, what does Joan do at this point? Well, in about 1428, that would make her right at 16 years old, she packs up her stuff and she rides off to a place called Vaucouleurs. Say that 3 times fast. And I apologize, France. Yes, Harv is butchering your language. It's not intentional, I promise you. There's my line. And she finds a stronghold, a keep, a castle that is loyal to Prince Charles, or Charles the Disowned at this point, and keeps going back because they keep saying, "You are nuts. We don't want any part of this. Go away. You think you're supposed to do this, fine, but we're not playing along. So sorry." Well, she won't take no for an answer. God told her to do this. She cannot turn her back. So she goes back again and again and again, and her persistence starts bringing about people who believe in her. She actually develops a little band of followers. And they believe in the fact that God told her to save France. Now, one of the tactics that she used was that she cut her hair short and she started wearing men's clothes. She jumped on her horse again and she rode 11 days to a place called Chinon, where the crown prince was known to be. She gets there and she goes directly to the prince now and says, "Hey, God called me to do this. Let me go into battle for you." And Charles says, "Well, I mean, yeah, okay, fine." And he gives her some troops to take to Orleans. Orleans is heavily under siege at this point by the English, and he says, you know, if you can win this battle, it will really help do damage to our attackers. So she goes to Orleans to fight her first battle with Charles' blessing. And, you know, Charles is a politician. Let's face it, kings are just politicians. And he's probably telling his advisors, what's the harm? If she wins, good for us. If she loses, there's no real loss, because Orleans was pretty much lost anyway. So, you know, these guys are constantly, and I mean constantly, hedging their bets. So she goes off to Orleans, fights her first battle, and manages to whoop some English butt. Yeah, Joan wins. She wins the fight and impresses Charles and draws even more people to her. I mean, you know, Charles' counselors are even telling him, don't let her do this. Well, she does. I mean, and she even, it's extravagant. She's got white armor. She's got a white horse. She goes riding off into the sunset and manages to win the battle at Orleans. This is a huge help to Charles. So now her reputation is spreading. People are really starting to flock to her banner, and, you know, starting to believe that Joan just might be the savior of France. So we got that field taken care of. All of the straw has been sold. Thank goodness. That took all day. Multiple trips, probably 10 or 11 trips. But the straw did bring in 25,000 euros, so I'm not going to complain. For straw. Who knew? Anyway, I've decided to bring some equipment over to the shop and get rid of it. Because, well, I've got the Fent. It's back in business. I've got this little cultivator. Got this little subsoiler. I'm going to sell them. The subsoiler's only worth about 8,400. That'll do, but the cultivator is almost 20,000. So about 28 grand. The reason I'm going to do that is because I've got something that will do the same job that's much, much cheaper. That's much, much cheaper. I'm going to go into the plows. I'm going to go down to the Lizard 6M, 9M. I'm going to expand this bad boy up to 9 meters. I'm going to give that a Harv's World color, even though it cost me an extra 500. All told, we're going to get this 9 meter subsoiler for less, well, just about what we sold the cultivator for. So I said expand my farm, expand my fields. What I meant was merge fields. So I've got my new subsoiler, my new plow, and as much as I do like the lane between these two fields, I like having an extra half acre or so to to plant in, bring in a little extra. So that's what I'm gonna do. And I'm going to see about making sure that GPS is set up so I can run a good line across here and get it just right. That ought to be just about right. That's a little too much. Let's try that. That looks good to me. So make sure I'm loaded into my course properly. I turn on create fields, drop this bad boy down. Yep, that looks exactly right. Oh, and you know what? Them there rocks are going to throw a big wrench in my works. Yeah, didn't plan for collecting rocks today. That's okay. Just part of the job, right? Now, this edge down here is not going to be quite so easy because, frankly, these two fields don't quite line up properly. So I'm just going to do the best I can to get this merge done without messing things up too much. Yeah. Yeah, that's not terrible. I'm not going to say it's great, but it's not terrible. And just try to swing into this next field about like so. That'll work. That will work. Oh, no, don't want to do that yet. I just turned off create fields, and I don't want to do that yet because I'm still creating fields right up through here. The rest of this needs to be plowed out, so kick that back on. Drop her down. There we go. Bye-bye, Mr. Lane. So sorry, but we need the space for our crops. Yes, we very much need the space for the crops. You'll get over it. There are other ways to get, I mean, there's numerous ways to get in and out of this farm. It's not like I'm trapped in these fields or anything, so we'll take it. And frankly, using this subsoiler is going to do me better than trying to use the cultivator and the tiny subsoiler and all of that. And since I've got the Fent, I might as well put it to use on something, right? I mean, none of those other tractors will pull this thing, but the Fent will take care of it with no problem. And since I'm plowing all of this, I will be plowing out the rest of this field. Right now I'm just doing this to do the field creation on this section. And I will have to put lime on this. Anytime you create a field, you've got to put lime down afterwards to prep your field. There we go. Now I can safely turn off field creation and get started plowing this field. So, we were talking about Joan of Arc, who brilliantly won the Battle of Orleans and became exceptionally famous for her prowess in battle and for the fact that she pushed the English back, and now they have the opportunity to put Charles on the throne. There's only one problem. The coronation is held in, it's either Reims or Rhymes, R-E-I-M-S. I believe it's Rhymes. Rhymes with rhymes. But Charles is nowhere close to Reims, and it's still hostile territory. I mean, they won the battle. The war is still on. And we're talking about the year 1429 or so. So, you know, it's been 9 years since the English took over. But Joan came in and set them on their heels and sent them packing. So Charles, since Joan is obviously becoming quite popular, quite powerful, and obviously a great battle commander, he asks her to escort him to Rheims through hostile territory. And of course she does, because God told her that she needed to make sure that Charles was put on the throne of France. And of course, she's going to take God, A, very seriously, and B, she's going to fulfill her duties. And she does just that. She escorts Charles to Rheims through hostile territory. They have many skirmishes along the way. They're fighting battles all the way to Rheims. But every time she is victorious and sends the hostiles packing. And ultimately, she does deliver Charles to Rheims. And he is crowned King of France. Now that Joan had fulfilled her duty to God and gotten Charles installed on the throne, Joan decided that it was time for the French to press their advantage, and she started pressing Charles to assault Paris. Now, even though the English had been driven back, Charles was now the King of France. Paris was still in English hands, and Joan very much wanted to go up there and say, yo, this is our capital. Get out. And for one reason or another, Charles kept putting her off and putting her off. Well, ultimately, as she is wont to do, because you know how obstinate she can be at this point, she's not one to just sit back and say, oh, okay, well, I guess we won't do that then. No, when she gets something in her head, she's decided that it's going to be done or else. And I'm sure at some point the king said, fine, if you want to go attack Paris, go attack Paris. I'm sick of hearing about it. I'm absolutely sick of hearing about it. So Joan goes off and assaults Paris. Unfortunately for Joan, she was not successful this time. She failed the assault of Paris, and the English were able to fortify their positions in Paris. They drove her back, and that was pretty much that for the Parisian conquest that Joan had in mind. So Joan isn't exactly, I mean, she might be hearing voices from God and all of that great stuff, but she's not invincible. She is not invincible, and at this point, because of her successes, and even after this particular defeat, Charles is really becoming concerned with how powerful Joan is becoming, how popular she is becoming, and his advisors are telling him the same thing. Charles goes to Joan and says, Joan, there is trouble in, I believe it's called Compiègne. I think it's Compiègne. Sorry, France. I don't mean to butcher your language. It's not intentional, I promise you. But the king tells Joan, I need you to go to Compiègne. I need you to take care of this. Send these people packing. So, of course, Joan is loyal to her king, and after all, she's pulled tooth and nail to make sure that he became king. So, of course, she's going to do what he wants her to do, and she heads off to Compiègne to confront the incursion by, it was Burgundy, I believe, that was attacking at that point. She goes to Compiègne to defend the town, and during the fighting, outside of the city gates, Joan is thrown from her horse. Her white stallion gives up, says, no, we're not going to carry you anymore. I don't know what happened. Maybe it got shot by an arrow, stabbed by a spear. Anything can happen in these battles. They were brutal battles, just brutal battles. We think of war in our time as being brutal. Yeah, welcome to the Middle Ages, guys. Nasty, nasty hand-to-hand swords, shields, horseback, foot, crossbows, bows. Just nasty fighting. Anyway, Joan gets thrown from her horse, and before she can scramble to her feet to get to the city gates, she is locked out. They close the gates on her and leave her behind. Joan is captured, and her captors take her to the English. They take her to a place called Rouen, Rouen, and turn her over to the English, because obviously she has been a major thorn in their side, and they want nothing more to do than get rid of this particular thorn once and for all. So now Joan is a captive of the English, and of course they promptly put her on trial. 70 charges against her. 70 charges against her, including witchcraft, dressing like a man, God forbid. Yeah, they charged her with dressing like a man. Amongst many other things. Heresy. So they were really out to get her. But more importantly, well, not more importantly, but a big part of what they were trying to do as well was discredit King Charles, because, you know, if they can prove that she's guilty of heresy and witchcraft, well, then that means that Charles has been consorting with a witch, and it's going to make him look bad. Of course, at this point, we know exactly how stubborn Joan is, and she's not going to give in. She's like, nope, didn't do it. You can't prove otherwise. You're just trying to do damage to me. And of course, she has her faith in God to back her up on all this. However, they finally wear her down. After a year in captivity, they finally break Joan of Arc. And under threat of death, she ultimately signs a confession and is found guilty. It saves her life. It saves her life for a very brief period of time. Because for whatever reason, and we'll never know, I mean, maybe somebody can speculate, but for whatever reason, she went and grabbed some men's clothes and put them back on and kind of rubbed the English's face in it. And they weren't having it. And because she put men's clothes on again, they sentenced her to death. And ultimately, am I going to be able to swing this? Oh, barely missed that tree. Ultimately, Joan of Arc was burned at the stake in Rouen. She was 19 years old when they burned her at the stake. 19. Can you imagine all she'd accomplished in 19 years on this earth? But it was, and for this they've got an exact date, May 30th, 1431. Joan of Arc was put to death by burning at the stake, which is what they did to witches. I'm sure they did it to many other people. Well, I know they did it to many other people, but if you were accused of witchcraft, burning at the stake was almost a guarantee. Almost a guarantee. Now, of course, she's not going to, I mean, even after death, Joan was not going to be set aside, ignored, forgotten. She had done too much, accomplished too much, and had gained too much fame and notoriety for the English to totally wipe her out. Now, some might be wondering at this point, what did Charles do when he knew that Joan was captured? Well, because this was obviously a dastardly attempt by the English to make Charles look bad, he did what any good politician would do, and he cut her loose. Yeah, after everything she'd done for him, he distanced himself from her. He said, "What? Who's Joan of Arc? I don't even know who you're talking about." I mean, that was kind of the stance he took. Like, yeah, whatever. There's there was some girl running around. I don't know who she was, but people apparently liked her a lot. But she had nothing to do with me. Yeah, such a political move. But finally, after 20 years, Joan did get a new trial, at least by the French, and she was found innocent. And ultimately, the Pope, because she had divine intervention in her life, if you will, or divine inspiration, I guess we should say, because of the divine inspiration, and it was believed that she did. In fact, even, I mean, signing her confession, she had to say that she never received guidance from God. You know, that was part of her signing the confession. So, you know, her life had to be horrible to get her to that point where she would actually say that. Because, obviously, her entire life had been focused and built around that. But ultimately, that came back for her after her death because the Pope granted her sainthood. And to this very day, Joan of Arc is the patron saint of France. Yeah, every French kid knows Joan of Arc. Every good French Catholic knows Joan of Arc because she was granted sainthood and is the patron saint of France. How cool is that? Horrible, horrible death, but man, did she ever do it right. Really. Okay, it looks like we are going to get this field done. I have got Mr. Kuntz. I don't know why I insist on calling him Mr. Kuntz. I just feel like Eric. It's so unfamiliar to say Mr., right? I should be friendlier, right? Eric is planting canola right now, and he's using our weeder to do it. That's one of the cool things about that weeder, is anything small seeded, grass, oilseed radish, and canola. Because we're planting canola, we can use the weeder to get that planted. So he's running that. I'm rolling this field. Oh, those trees got in my way, and I just kept on turning. But I've got one more trick up my sleeve that I'm going to pull out here in just a few minutes that I think might help us along even more. Okay, this field is rolled, and I said I got one more trick up my sleeve. I do, by the way. I've always got a trick up my sleeve. Anyway, this field is planted. The only thing it needs now is one more application of fertilizer, and I'm going to double check that just to be sure. Yep, that's all it needs. There's no weeds growing. We are good to go. Now, what's that last trick I've got up my sleeve? Well, I am going to look into, animals, I want some beehives. I'm going the cheap route, mind you. I'm going the cheap route, but I'm going to put half a dozen beehives out here. That's going to cost me almost $7,000. But more importantly, beehives will improve canola production. Now, they do have a range. I want to make sure I know what there we go. That's about right. Make sure they're facing the field. They do have a range, but I don't want to get them so close to my field that they become an obstruction, you know? And let's get it down farther. Maybe if I just jack them in close to these trees, there'll be less of an obstruction. So I'm going to put 3 on each side. So we're going to put one about here. And then, yeah, about right in here. Okay, so there's the first 3. Yeah, Harv. There we go. Now, I don't know that there's much I can do to keep them from being completely an obstruction, but, and they're probably going to get in the way of my grass field over here a little bit, but I hope not too bad. Oh man, that jacked up the terrain there. Not. It's the shadow that's okay. I'm gonna put this one here, and then this one's gonna be tricky because I don't want. Let's try right here. And hopefully that won't put them too far away from the field that the bees won't be able to do their jobs. And now I need a place to collect honey. And I'm just going to stick that right back here behind the house. Right about there. Now all my honey will go to that spot. Apparently the bees are sleeping at the moment. They're not doing much. Oh well. They will. I'm sure they will. Now, the honey is, I would call the honey more of a byproduct or a bonus. I'm not counting on the honey to pay this back. What I'm counting on is that it will boost my harvest enough to pay for itself. That's what I want. With a little bit of luck, that's what I'll get. I've got a couple more tasks I want to finish up on the farm tonight. I'm going to empty the bunker silo again. That new batch of silage is ready to go. Roughly 60,000 liters or so, our short batch. But I think that's going to do it for this episode of HAUT BELERON. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons down below. As always, I very much appreciate you coming along for the ride. And until next time, take care.